Imagine sitting down after a loved one passes away and reading their will, but something feels wrong. Maybe the person who inherited everything was someone who suddenly became very involved near the end of your loved one's life. Maybe family members noticed decisions being made that seemed completely out of character. Or maybe you're asking yourself, did my loved one really make this decision freely? That question comes up more often than many people realize. One of the biggest misunderstandings about challenging a will is that it's not enough to simply believe the decision was unfair. There's usually a much bigger question the court wants to understand. They want to know, is what the will says truly the person's choice, or was someone else improperly influencing them? This video is just for educational purposes. It's not legal advice. Because every legal matter is unique. The law depends on specific facts of your situation. But in this video, I'll explain generally what undue influence means and what types of circumstances can raise concerns and what people typically need to understand when a will is challenged. So when someone creates a will, the basic idea is that they're expressing their own wishes. They decide who should receive their property, who should be involved in managing their affairs, and what they want their legacy to look like. But what happens when family members believe those decisions were not really made freely? This is where the concept of undue influence comes in. Many people hear undue influence and think it simply means that someone talked someone else into changing their mind. But legally, the idea is usually more complicated than that. Persuasion and influence are normal parts of life. Families talk, people give advice, loved ones helped each other make decisions. And so that alone doesn't necessarily mean that something improper happened. The important question is whether someone crossed a line in creating a will and overpowered a person's own wishes. So how do you tell the difference? That's where facts become extremely important. So let's start with the basics. Undue influence generally refers to a situation where someone uses improper pressure or manipulation to affect another person's decisions, especially when creating or changing important documents, like a will. A person creating a will should generally be making their own decisions. They should understand what they're doing. They should be acting according to their own wishes. But sometimes circumstances raise questions. For example, if a person becomes seriously ill and a new caregiver or a new acquaintance becomes heavily involved, and then shortly afterward a major change is made to the will that benefits that person, this situation doesn't automatically prove undue influence, but the circumstances seem to merit further examination. In these type of situations, courts generally look at the entire picture when determining if a will is invalid. When someone challenges a will based on possible undue influence, the focus is usually on the circumstances surrounding the creation of that will. Some questions that may matter include, was the person creating the will vulnerable in some sort of way? Did someone else have significant control over their daily life or decisions? Was there a sudden or unexpected change in the estate plan? Did someone benefit from a change in a way that seems unusual? Was the person who created the will isolated from other family members or trusted friends? Again, none of these things alone automatically prove undue influence, but they may become part of a larger picture. A person does not have to force someone physically or threaten them for undue influence concerns to exist. Sometimes the issue can be much more subtle. It can involve dependence and trust, isolation, or manipulation. Because these situations can be very complicated, the details matter. Some mistakes people make when thinking about undue influence in a will are assuming that being left out of a will means that undue influence occurred. But A person generally has the ability to make decisions about their own estate and can choose to leave property differently than family members expect. Another mistake can be assuming that an unusual decision automatically means that someone did something wrong. But remember that people do change their minds. Relationships and family circumstances change. A decision that seems surprising may still be completely valid. Also, can make the mistake of waiting too long to ask questions. Estate matters often involve deadlines and legal procedures that vary depending on the location and circumstances. If someone believes there may be a problem, understanding the situation quickly can be important. The biggest mistake may be focusing only on the outcome instead of the process. The fact that someone received an inheritance does not automatically mean that they influenced the person who created the will improperly. The question is more in the circumstances. How was that decision made? So let's bring everything together. We know that undue influence is not simply about someone receiving more than expected from a will. It's not simply about family disagreement. It's not simply about a decision that feels unfair. The focus is on whether someone improperly affected another person's ability to make their own decisions. So, how do you prove undue influence when you're contesting a will? To prove undue influence in a will contest, someone generally must show facts that demonstrate that the will may not represent the person's true wishes because of improper influence. The specific requirements vary depending on the state that you're in and the different circumstances that arise. Generally, the person challenging the will need to present evidence about things like the deceased's vulnerability or dependence on another individual, or the relationship between the deceased and the person who benefited from the will. You may need to show whether the deceased had an opportunity to influence the decisions that were made, or whether the circumstances surrounding a will change could suggest possible manipulation, whether the final documents reflect the deceased person's independent wishes. The important thing to understand is that courts usually look at the entire situation, not just one single event. A person receiving an unexpected inheritance does not automatically mean that undue influence occurred. Family members being unhappy with a will does not automatically mean that the will was created improperly. Every situation is different, and the facts matter. The laws vary from state to state, and only an attorney who understands specific circumstances can provide legal advice about what may apply in individual situations. So if you're dealing with questions about a loved one's will, remember that your specific situation is unique. If you'd like to understand how the law applies in your case, mention this video to the attorneys at Woodbury and Ibarra for a free consultation. The link is in the description, the phone number as well. They are experienced in and specialize in these very types of issues. They can help you get the information that you need to move forward.